Hello and welcome back to another edition of Open Air Atheist. I'm James Theodore Stillwell III, and today's episode is entitled The 4gospels Exposed. There are only two kinds of stories in the past: fairy tales and fact, that is, stories that actually happened, and fictional stories that never took place. To determine which are the things that happened and you want contemporary accounts, reasonably close to the time that the story was proposed to have occurred. And it helps if you have many of these accounts and you want these accounts to be independent of each other. You don't want collaborations, but independencies. However, even though you don't want collaboration, you do want accounts that corroborate one another, accounts that are consistent with what they have to say about the subject at hand, and you want sources that are not biased. This is not the case with the 4 Gospels, and sadly the Gospels are our best sources for Jesus' life, and unfortunately they are not reliable when it comes to historical value. The Gospels were written 35 to 60 years after Jesus' death, not by people who were eyewitnesses, but by people living later who were highly literate and trained Greek-speaking Christians, 2 or 3 generations after Jesus' death. The Gospels are not written by Jesus' Aramaic-speaking disciples, but by people living 30, 40, 50, 60, and even 70 years later. Where did they get their information from? The Gospels are proposed via Catholic tradition to have been written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But no one knows, and I find this to be unlikely, that it was written by these disciples of Jesus. The titles are later additions. How do you convert people and get them to stop worshiping their gods and replace them with Jesus? The answer is simple. You must tell them stories about Jesus, so you convert others on the basis of the stories told. Converted people convert people, and those people convert people, hence the spread and development of Jesus' fairy tales, or the fairy tales of Jesus. How do we know the stories were changed in the process of transmission? How do we know this? We know the stories got changed because of the plethora of differences and contradictions found in the 4 Gospels that can't be reconciled with each other. Don't take my word, simply just look for yourself. One of the reasons why many Christians don't notice the contradictions is that they read the Gospels vertically. The way to see differences in the Gospels is to read them horizontally. Read one story in Matthew and the same story in Mark, and compare the stories and see what you come up with. Just take the death of Jesus, for instance. What day did Jesus die on, and what time of day? Did he die on the day before the Passover meal, as the Gospel of John explicitly says, or did he die after it was eaten, as Mark explicitly says? Depends on what Gospel you read. Did he die at noon, as John states, or at 9 a.m., as Mark states? That depends on what Gospel you read. Did Jesus carry his cross an entire way himself? Or did Simon of Cyrene carry his cross? Again, it depends on what Gospel you read. Did both robbers mock Jesus on the cross, or did one of them come to his defense? Depends what Gospel you read. Did the curtain in the temple rip before Jesus died? After his death? Depends on what Gospel you read. Now let's move on to the resurrection story. Who went to the tomb on the 3rd day? Was it Mary alone, or was it Mary with other women? If it was Mary with other women, which one Which ones were they, and what were their names? Was the stone rolled away before they got there or not? What did they see in the tomb? Did they see a man? Did they see two men? Or did they see an angel? Depends what gospel or account you read. What were they told to tell the disciples? Were the disciples supposed to go to Jerusalem and see Jesus there? Were they supposed to stay and see Jesus there, or go to Galilee and see Jesus there? Did the women tell anyone or not? It depends which gospel you read. Did the disciples never leave Jerusalem, or did they immediately leave Jerusalem and go to Galilee? Did they hold Jesus' feet or not? Was there an earthquake or no earthquake? Was there no angel or two angels? Were there blind men or only one blind man healed by Jesus? Were there shepherds at Jerusalem or at Jesus' birth, or wise men? It depends on what gospel you read. Let me state some more contradictions found. What color was the robe placed on Jesus at his trial? Matthew 27:28 says scarlet, but John 19:2 says purple. What did Jesus drink while he was hanging on the cross? Matthew 27:34 says vinegar. Mark 15:23 wine with myrrh. What was Jesus' prediction regarding Peter's denial? Matthew 26:34 has Jesus predicting it before the cock crow, and Mark has Jesus predicting Peter's denial after the cock crows twice. Was Jesus' first sermon on a plain or mount? In Matthew's gospel, Matthew 5, chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, take place on a mount, but in Luke 6, 17 and 20, on a plain. Who is the father of Joseph? Matthew 1:16 says Joseph's father is Jacob, but in Luke 3:23, Joseph's father is said to be, Joseph is said to be fathered by Haley. I hope I'm saying that right, or Healy. What were Jesus' last words before his death? Matthew 27:46, or Matthew 27:50 says his last words were, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" Luke 23:46 says his last words were, "Father, unto thy hands I commend my spirit." John 19:30, Jesus' last words are simply, "It is finished." Tonight I actually had a Christian, in effect, tell me that she will believe regardless, without reason and evidence. As for me, however, I will continue to seek the truth and use reason to follow the evidence where it leads. As for you, and what you, my viewers, believe or disbelieve, I hope it is based on fact and logical reasoning, not the fallacy of wishful thinking and arbitrary faith. I wish you well, and I wish you a good night. And I hope that you will stay tuned for other episodes. I actually plan on doing a second part or a second interview to my interview with a Satanist. So I hope you stay tuned for that. And of course, I will be doing more on contradictions in the New Testament. There's plenty more in the Gospels for me to poke at. So stay tuned for those. Until then, have a good night, and thank you for watching.